Just another video about this this topic I want to talk about, get into. Destroying games.
This video is brought to you by Incogni. Stick around to hear more about the special offer they're providing to the entire operational community. All right, this particular video comes at a bit of an inopportune time. See, the concept of them destroying your games could refer to a lot of things, especially for those engaged in the political side of gaming commentary. But for the sake of clarity here, I'm talking about
intergalactic vampires.
Publishers, and I'm also not hovering on the brink, metaphorically speaking. Publishers are, quite literally here, destroying games, rendering them unplayable for you, and thereby, in my opinion, stealing your money, while circumventing whatever laws they can in the process, or more descriptively, taking advantage of a regulatory environment where laws to protect the purchases that you make in this category don't seem to effectively be defined at all.
That's completely accurate, by the way. There are no regulations on this, so companies take advantage of it, and they do what they want to do to save money, and the customer is the one who suffers.
It sounds kind of extreme to some, but it's actually a very pressing issue that rose to prominence over the past 15 or so years, give or take. There's plenty of individual examples here, but the best way to start is by showcasing the general industry transformation. Video games have undergone a colossal shift from a physical medium to a digital one. In the past, you had hardware that played the game, files contained on a physical storage device, and a subsequent experience that was effectively irrevocable, for lack of a better word.
In my opinion, I think that video games will still be able to be sold as physical items, but they will be sold more often as like deluxe editions in the same way that vinyl in a lot of cases would outsell CDs because people buy vinyl for collecting.
But now the transition has been made to
it's just that transition hasn't fully happened yet, and an example of that transition happening is Baldur's Gate 3 Deluxe Edition.
Purely digital medium, even so far as an open acknowledgement that the physical world of distribution for video games will probably die out completely. Simultaneously, the industry is also witnessing a genre shift.
It will go down by 90% though, but it will turn into like a collector item, novelty item, like a luxury item, something like that.
This part is a bit more contentious, I'd say, but the general behavior we see from major publishing companies appears to be hyper-fixated on games as a service instead of games as a product, which exacerbates the problem of requiring constant internet connections or otherwise forcing dependence on the publisher directly instead of allowing agency over the product that you purchased for yourself. They explicitly do not want to sell you something and subsequently allow you to control it. They would rather...
I actually am really curious, because like I'd have to really think this one out ethically and logically. If you bought a video game, should you be ethically obligated to play that video game on the official servers? Like, I feel like there are really, really strong arguments for both of them. I don't know. But here's one point that we can all agree on, is that after developers or publishers after they are no longer providing the official servers, I do not think that they should have the autonomy to shut down private servers. So like, for example, Halo 3, let's say Halo 3 doesn't have Master Chief Collection, and all of the Halo 3 servers go down. I don't think that Bungie or Microsoft or whoever owned it at the time should have the right to shut down private servers that are keeping the game alive whenever they're not providing an existing competing product. That's one thing, like, we can talk about while the product is in the market. I think that's a very interesting conversation. I actually I'll probably think about that a lot in the next few days. But I think that especially whenever they stop providing it, which is really what the big concern is, right? Whenever they stop providing it, you as a user should have every right to provide an alternative option to use the content that you paid for that they cannot lose a sale from. I am totally fine for preventing piracy, but you can't prevent piracy whenever a sale is not being made. There is no sale condition.
Or sell temporary access to something and then make unilateral decisions about the future of that service with zero accountability. See, it used to be, if you purchased a video game, you had that game until you made a mistake and broke the hardware, like literally and physically. In some ways, that's inconvenient.
This isn't always true, and I think this ties into the conversation around what's referred to as planned obsolescence, which is whenever, like, how many of you guys have had a cell phone, and it feels like every 2 or 3 years, your cell phone, like, it's going like this, like, in terms of performance, and it just nosedives. Have you guys had that happen? Yeah, or a Ford? Well, I don't know. I have a Ford 2001 Mustang. It works great. Well, until I fucked it up. But I still drove it around today. So yeah, every year, right. And so there actually, I do think that hardware does actually run into this same problem, but I think that's kind of a it's kind of a granular point, not really the point of the video. But I just did want to bring that up because I do think it's relevant.
Yes, and modern digital systems allow you to access accounts from any device through login credentials, thereby increasing your relative convenience while doing so. But in other ways, it provided security, because the thing you had ownership of really couldn't be discretionarily revoked by a third-party publisher. Nowadays, that's no longer true. And like I said earlier, there's a ton of individual examples to choose from, but I'll just pick a few that I have personal experience with.
Here we go.
Before continuing on, today's video is made possible by CatDany, which is an online privacy and data protection service. Every day, without fail, your data is being sold by third-party brokers or frequently accessed without your knowledge.
Never fucking give them your email. Never give them your address. Never give them your phone number. Don't give them your name. Don't give them anything.
In data breaches. A recent example would be Facebook literally selling your message history to Netflix. Some people don't care about this. They should care, in my opinion. But this lack of data protection often facilitates identity theft or other cybercrime. And for anyone who wants to prevent that kind of...
Netflix sold private user data conversations in order for Netflix to parse through an algorithm to determine which shows were popular and which ones were not. And the time that this happened was in 2011.
Thing CatDany can help. Your personal information is everywhere, not just
the
in the
good thing, however, is that it's never happened after that, right, guys? That was the last time it happened.
What a relief. You know about, but other data firms as well, who then sell it all across the internet.
Jeez.
For everyday users, it's effectively an impossible task to stop that in any capacity, because there are hundreds of these data brokers, and it's a really insurmountable obstacle to contact them, fight objections, and get anything actually removed. However, CatDany does all of this for you quickly and easily. I've used it myself, it works, I've seen the results, and therefore I can sincerely recommend it. The process is relatively simple. Sign up for the website, give them specific legal permission to work on your behalf, and let them know the information that they'll be having removed. After that, sit back and let them work. Aggregation of the service lets them streamline the process, because most people as individuals can't really do anything and don't have the time or ability to make a difference. Using the link down below in the description and code ECHELON at checkout, you'll get 60% off an annual subscription to CatDany. There's a lot more I could say. The services they offer and the value they provide is...
You know what CatDany should be? It should be called the government. It should be called Government Regulation and Privacy Regulation. But it's not, so this company exists.
Exceptionally worthwhile, but for the sake of time, I'll leave it at that. Again, link down below and promo code ECHELON for 60% off your subscription. Big thank you to CatDany for sponsoring the channel. First up is an example that most contemporary gamers will probably be aware of, and that's Warzone. Call of Duty Warzone is a household name.
When they went to Warzone 1 to 2.
One of the more disruptive moments in the game's history was when Activision completely shut down the original Warzone experience in favor of its sequel. Now, for some, that's inconsequential, but the key factor we need to consider is that when doing this, they also revoked access to a very, very large number of in-game purchases that many players had made, rendering them not just useless, but completely gone. Some people were upset, others weren't.
I would love if there was a law that you could refund online digital good, like objects like this, with like no restrictions, or like a 2-year window. Because I feel like this is a huge fucking problem with these games that are able to do this and then close the game and keep all your money. And I think also, if you had a law like that, you would probably see a lot more companies be way more gun-shy about adding in microtransactions. Especially into games that they're trying to use microtransactions to keep the game on life support. This would actually be, it would be like a, like a 2 birds with 1 stone thing, you know?
The idea of purchasing something you want to use and then having it be completely useless by the issuing company at any point in the future that they arbitrarily choose with no communication to you about it if they don't want to, well, it starts to feel kind of strange. Let's move on to Evolve. Evolve was an asymmetrical PvP experience where hunters would take down a monster, and from my perspective, it was kind of an interesting game. However, in 2023...
I don't know if he's going to bring it up. He's not. Overwatch. Overwatch is another example of this.
Published on the 2K support website, it was announced that Evolve would be taken offline permanently. The servers would be shut down, and the thing that people spent their money on would cease to function properly. Sure, certain components of the game would still function, but after a very long back and forth with the fan community, 2K would now be destroying the ability for players to engage with each other, even on peer-to-peer servers, which had previously been supported, marking the removal of a product function that people had paid for simply because the company decided we don't want to deal with this anymore. How about another one?
That's cute. Wow.
Cycle. This one hits close to home because I actually liked this game. I played it, I reviewed it.
Like, I feel like that's way over the line. Like, the game had functionality for peer-to-peer, but they took it off so nobody could play it.
To find out in September of 2023, they killed it. Steam is actually full of reviews where people are lamenting the fact
scummy.
that it's gone.
That's
and sure,
horseshit.
it was technically free to play as an experience, but they had microtransaction bundles from $10 all the way up to $100. And everything you purchased is now entirely useless, regardless of what it was.
Hey, guys, I want to keep you in mind, okay? Every purchase that you make in Genshin Impact, every purchase you make in Honkai Star Rail, one day you will see this message about it. One day it will happen. They will delete your waifus, and they will be gone. And all you'll have left is your Rule 34.
Or how much it cost. I can go a little bit more rapid fire here, but the examples of what I'm talking about are everywhere. EA shuts down
really not
games
that big
in
of a
literal
deal, right?
batches, like Bad Company 2, Dead Space 2, and Crysis 3. Indie games, such
Club
as
Penguin.
Spellbreak, for example, that were gobbled up by the Epic Game Store, have their servers officially shut down.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the developers created a standalone version where players can host their own servers for that one, which is great. You'd love to see
Huge
that.
W. Look at that. That's amazing.
But even more extreme...
Which, by the way, Spellbreak was made by Proletariat, right? I could be wrong. I just want to make sure that I have all this right. Yeah, it was. Okay, so yeah, this group right here that made this actually was absorbed by the Blizzard Warcraft team. So this is actually great to hear. Yeah, and people put the points together. Yeah, Plunderstorm, right? This is actually like, yeah, actual W pickup by Blizzard.
Companies like Warner Brothers will delist over a dozen games under the Adult Swim banner in this case, while deliberately refusing to transfer those games back to the developers in order to keep them active and playable.
Right.
Warner Brothers just doesn't care about the games or the playability or
they already made their
preservation
money
in general. And they're taking advantage of a regulatory environment where there are no protections for any of these things. They can just render content unplayable and obsolete on a whim with no recourse. As if that weren't enough, or to really drive home the existence of a general shift here, PlayStation took a fairly unprecedented step recently where they revoked the digital access license for a demo of Stellar Blade. The details here are a bit complicated, but the gist of it is this. Stellar Blade released...
Oh, this was kind of justified, but it's more of like an indication of a bigger problem and an exercise of something that could be used unethically, even though this instance wasn't bad.
Demo to the PlayStation Store early, presumably by mistake in this case. People obviously downloaded the file very quickly, but then Sony revoked everyone's access, causing the game to become unplayable for anyone even connected to PSN, which even booted some people out of the demo mid-session.
Yeah.
That's called a kill switch. And yes, it's a demo, it's not a paid product.
So what he's really saying is that this isn't really anything other than a test circumstance that proves that Sony can revoke access to games that you've already paid money for, even if they're offline games. In the instance that it was done in, it's not really a big deal or problematic at all. But it does show that they have the ability to do that, which is unsettling.
Particular, but the point I'm trying to illustrate is that there is a consistently evolving shift across the majority of the video game industry, where the things that you play are not products anymore. You do not own them. And they can be either
you have a
shut
license to play the game,
down, revoked, or transformed at the sole discretion of a publisher.
That's right.
Without warning, rendering the product unplayable or any amount of content you spent money on completely void. That is a disturbing prospect to me, and it simply did not happen a couple decades ago. One more example.
To be fair, it could not happen a couple of decades ago. If it could have happened, it would have. They did it as soon as they could.
which then becomes the jumping off point for what can you do to stop it. Because the fantastic part of this video is that there are...
You have to wait for politicians and policymakers to be old enough to where their game gets canceled, and then immediately this will be fixed.
A set of actions that you can take thanks to a dedicated YouTuber named
Ross,
then
they'll take care of it. No big deal.
Farms. The Crew. That's the catalyst here, because in late 2023, Ubisoft announced that they would be shutting down the game. Here's the issue, though. The Crew is actually a very large, very successful game, or it was over the span of its lifetime, which means there's a lot of people who own it, a lot of people who played it, and a lot of people who enjoyed it. That's a perfect storm, because Ubisoft is also headquartered in France, not the United States, which helps in terms of consumer recourse. And all things combined, it presents us with a bit of a perfect storm opportunity. I'm going to put a link down below to the video on Ross's channel.
I watched this one before.
I would highly encourage everyone to watch that video and other
content this was a great video
that he posts, but here's the bullet points of what matter the most. Ross worked very hard, consulted legal experts, and hunted down specific complaint portals all over the world to devise a series of actions that will give the gaming industry a very real shot at sparking some sort of intervention aimed at stopping publishers from just shutting down games.
Yeah, I think that the two big barriers to this, well, there's actually three if you're including the US. The third one, of course, is lobbying and special interests that are bribing elected officials to do things that are bad for the people in order to get more money. So, like, there's that. That's kind of a big one. But even aside from that, the other issue is that this problem is very complex to somebody who doesn't play video games. Like, if you don't play video games, there's like 3 different levels of foundational information that you have to have in order to understand what this problem really is. So for anybody who's not into gaming, which are like these 65-year-old voters, these people don't understand it. And the problem is that whenever these 65-year-old voters see, oh, wow, our elected official is fucking around trying to regulate video games, and, you know, he's not regulating their social security or regulating the border or something like that, what they think is important, well, then they're going to view that as them not being represented, and so they're not going to vote for him. Like, that's the other problem, right? So you need to be able to explain it to an audience of people in a way that's accessible, which I don't think anybody has done, including myself or Ross or Upper Echelon. I think it's very hard to do that. And then the third thing is to have the politicians themselves have working knowledge of the issue. Because I think that you see this right now with AI, and we saw this in the last decade with social media, where you can see politicians clearly understand what social media is, but because they don't know the nuances of it, you have politicians that are asking the TikTok CEO, does TikTok connect to Wi-Fi? Because they understand that TikTok is social media, they understand that there are videos on TikTok, but they don't understand anything beyond that, right? So it's like, in a way, it's worse than not understanding anything because they think they know what they're talking about. Whereas before, they were like, I don't know. Well, now they think they do know, and that's scary.
This is the most comprehensive effort I've ever seen on the topic. He's got a very
well
laid out
Chinese?
website called stopkillinggames.com,
right,
with 2 G's between killing and games, which is also linked down below, importantly. And he's done all the legwork needed for viewers to help as quickly and conveniently as possible.
Yeah.
It is very easy to take action right now. It mostly consists of petitions and complaints, which are outlined perfectly on the website. And I won't explain all the gory details right now. He's already done that very thoroughly. But the main point here is that when discussing this topic, it's typically a very defeatist mentality. Normally, the criticism...
It is. It definitely is. And I think that this topic, what I'm hoping for, the best chance that we have contemporary-wise, like in terms of like in the next 5 years, is that there is some tangential issue that happens with a streaming service that a lot of like normies use. And then whenever that happens, and now they can't use or watch a certain show on that streaming service, they can understand that like this is a parallel to that issue. That is the best chance that we have.
Of gaming industry trends, which I myself am guilty of, is just criticism, zero action. But thanks to Ross, we have an actual shot at making a difference right now. So this is no longer a simple display of hollow criticism. It's a call to action. Video games are shifting to a purely digital medium, but with that, in conjunction with certain trends like
You need to have
live
certain
service
rights.
games,
Yeah.
always online servers, etc., with that, they are increasingly vulnerable when it comes to planned or deliberate obsolescence. Games are no longer being made as products. They are often being made deliberately as services. But these companies are intentionally operating in a retail consumer gray area of sorts by allowing everyone to keep thinking it's a product and leaning into that idea
And giving them money as if it is a product. Another very big component here.
they can still, while completely ignoring even the most basic concept of preservation, even so far as to make it impossible to preserve some games.
Yeah.
Where the community is openly willing to shoulder that burden themselves if even given the option. What makes all this even more fitting is that this trend, where ownership of games is quickly evaporating completely, is an area where Ubisoft Director of Subscriptions Philip Tremblay said, quote, "One of the things we see is that gamers are used to, a little bit like DVD, having and owning their games. That's the consumer shift that needs to happen. They got comfortable not owning their CD collection or DVD collection. That's a transformation."
You know, actually, I don't think that this is a contradictory statement at all. Because if you look at the nuance into what he said, because I remember reading this article myself, and I thought to myself, a lot of people hear what he's saying, and it's like, you know, you just see like the big gamers need to not like owning games, right? But whenever you actually listen to like what he was saying, he was talking about this in the context of streaming services and people subscribing to things like Game Pass instead of buying individual games. And I think that revoking access to something like Game Pass, there's the added complexity of microtransactions. But other than that, just being able to play games on Game Pass and then having that revoked completely, I think that that's not really as bad as buying a specific game in perpetuity and then having the access to that game revoked. So, like, I actually think that if this was the mode of consumption, this would actually be better than how it is now. And I don't want how it is now or this. But even this would be better than what we have now. Well, it's a rental service, basically? Exactly.
It's been a bit slower to happen in games. As gamers grow comfortable in that aspect, you don't lose your progress. If you resume your game at another time, your progress file is still there.
Yeah,
That's
Steam
been
has
deleted.
this.
You don't lose what you've built in the game or your engagement with the game.
Yeah.
So it's about feeling comfortable with not owning your game, end quote. That
Which
is,
will be the future. This, like, by the way, this will 100% be the future. And I think that not only will you not own your game, but in 20 years, the game won't even be on your PC. I think we're going to be cloud gaming in probably less than 10. And by 20, it's going to be normalized.
just
That's
quite
what I
frankly
think.
baffling to me.
The game will own you?
Ubisoft is
Well,
a
that's already
company that
happening.
absolutely embraces the concept of deleting content and progress,
Yeah.
evidenced quite clearly by their full-scale shutdown of a game that had 12 million copies sold, and yet the industry has become so complacent during this shift, they seem to think that no one could ever fight back. Well, once again, offering high praise here to Ross.
Well, I mean, the truth is that they've been right so far. They have been right completely. They've been right with selling gambling to children. They've been right with allowing kids to access mature content without any sort of real restriction because they try to self-regulate with ESRB to avoid having actual regulation, which doesn't really hold any weight or any value. And then they also co-opt ESRB to, based off of their own, I've just...
First farms, now you can. More and more games are shutting down constantly, and typically that's a result of poor performance. But the underlying logic of it all is that gaming companies want to maximize profits, which means that any always online game that runs afoul of that particular initiative can just get chopped. Companies.
Well, here's the reality, right? Is that a lot of games go like this. Here's the break-even point, and they go like this. In here, everything's great, and the game's doing really well. And then at a certain point, it goes under that break-even point, and now the game is causing them to lose money, and then the game dies. That's it. That's what they do. They pull the plug.
Don't want to spend even minimal resources to ensure continuity of access to products that they themselves are selling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's time they're held accountable for these practices and forced. Doesn't matter what they want
Yes.
to do. They should be forced to do it with no choice, to offer preservation tools of some kind, or clearly articulate timelines.
I don't even think that they need to offer preservation tools, but I think that they don't have the right to suppress them. Because as it stands right now, based off of copyright law, they have complete autonomy over the way that other people use their medium, even if they're not providing an opportunity to do that themselves. So I don't even know if they have to provide that opportunity for people, but I do think that they should not be able to shut it down.
Of deletion before selling a product.
I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just not sure.
Here. I don't think it's a very controversial thing to say that you should not have to buy something and wonder, gosh, I don't know, when's it going to stop working forever? I mean, I like playing it, and it's been advertised as...
And again, to be fair, every piece of hardware is like that.
Live service, which...
But it is like that because of a, like, functional limitation, and not because it is being enforced by an artificial law. Like, the actual chip stops working, rather than the IP law allows the company to stop it from happening. One of them is artificial, the other one is natural.
Insinuates perpetuity, or at the very least a long time frame, but I wonder if they'll just delete it all after a year or two, because it's not convenient.
I bet that's probably what they do with things like FIFA. Because, like, they plan on making a new FIFA game every year, so I bet they're probably not running servers for, like, FIFA 2011.
More for them to support, and
there
I'll
it
use
is.
The game as well as everything I spent money on inside it. You should not have to wonder that. And the fact that these companies have skirted any sort of accountability on this topic for so long is kind of baffling. Anyway, the point here is to say that the video game industry very deliberately deletes content it sold you for full price without warning, without clarity, and without regret. Up till now, there's been...
And more importantly, without recourse, which is the main problem.
Very little
because
recourse.
If you could get a refund after they cancel the game, everything would be fine.
Course available, but thanks to the efforts of some dedicated enthusiasts and primarily a high-quality YouTuber, now there is.
Mm-hmm.
We should all seize that opportunity and help as much as we can, because opportunities like that are not exactly common. Again, links down below for taking legitimate action. High praise to Ross and Accursed Farms for making all of that possible.
No
Other
doubt.
links as well to support the channel, the video sponsor, Incogni, of course. We have actual merchandise now after all these years. A whole spring collection that'll be gone in like a day or two, actually. So it's about to disappear. Check that out while
We
you can.
all lie.
Again, link down below. As well as other things, locals and Patreon monthly subscriptions. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching. Question everything. And have a nice night.
I think this was really clean. I do. I think this is going to become a bigger problem every single year. And I'm glad that when we talk about Overwatch, there are only so many examples that you can use, and the video doesn't have to be 100 hours long like every single one of my videos, because I'm like, oh, and another thing, and I just remembered this, and do you remember this one situation that happened 4 years ago? Well, I do. Let's talk about it again. You know, so yeah, it doesn't have to be like that. That's why I'm here, okay, guys? Someone who's played games since the 80s, this shit's depressing. It's not depressing at all. It's just the current situation. And in the 80s, we had other problems. Well, you had other problems. I didn't exist. I didn't exist till the 90s. But in the 80s, you had arcades. And arcades were problematic in the way that Mortal Kombat 2 or 3 was like programmed to like aimbot you and like instantly kill you to make you spend more money. Like, so yeah, it definitely was like that. And so there have always been problems like this, for sure. It was rigged. Yeah, it was literally rigged. I watched a whole video about it. Mortal Kombat was the 90s? Really, was it? Okay, never mind. Well, either way, arcade machines were kind of, spent a lot of money on arcade machines. So yeah, you had a point with all the coins you had put in? Yeah, no doubt. And so I think this problem is just going to become bigger and bigger because... And I know that some people are going to use the argument that, well, you signed the release and you signed the contract, so you should be able to do it. I don't think that there are some contracts a user should be able to sign. And I think that also users should not be able to void certain customer rights by signing a contract that the entire industry collectively forces you to sign. Because that's effectively a monopoly, even though the companies are acting independently. So I don't really think that's a good argument, and I think that really consumer protections are supposed to be to protect consumers. So what value is a consumer protection if all you have to do is just make somebody sign a contract and they lose all of their consumer protections? People have rights, and those rights supersede like EULAs and terms of service of a video game. Like, let's be honest, like those rights should massively supersede that. And I think that we're seeing the reason for that right now. They force you to sign a COS, or they won't let you play the game you bought? Yes, but forcing you to sign the TOS does not mean that they can apply the TOS to the letter of the law. Because again, you have to keep in mind that the government, like whenever, for example, you do something wrong and like you're trying to shut something down, they don't just send random people to your house. You have like government officials that do this. The government enacts these behaviors on, it's not like Nintendo is coming to your house and doing this. It's the government that's doing it, and Nintendo is doing it through the government. So if the government does not allow itself to be used in this purpose, then the company functionally can't do it. Because the government has a monopoly on violence. That's just the way it is, and thank God for that. And so I think that you have to keep in mind that it is really the government's call. And they are the ones that enforce the terms of service, not the company. Because let's say you like, think about it like this. You sign the terms of service of a game, and then you just decide to yourself, you know what? I'm just not going to follow this. What do? What do? How can they possibly stop you from that? They can sue you. But where do they sue you in? Who decides that you have to pay a lawsuit or show up to a lawsuit? Let's say they sue you and you say, no, you don't. Nope. Well, the government makes you do that. So again, if the government does not allow itself to be used, because this is really what's happening, right? Is that you're seeing these companies using the government as a tool to assert I think an unethical level of control over the consumer. That's what I think is happening right now. How do you handle the situation whenever the company goes bankrupt? Leave the game open is probably the best consumer option. The problem is not that the game's shut down. And I know this might sound crazy, but I actually don't think that's the problem. And I don't think that by buying a video game, because if you tell people that every single online game has to maintain uptime in perpetuity forever, nobody would ever make an online game again. Because you can't make a projection like that. That's insane. No business can function that way. So you would have to make the option for the developer to shut down a game. You have to have that, or no video games can exist online, period. So what is the solution? The solution is that if the developer or the publisher is not providing that option to play online, that other people that own the game can provide that instead. That is what the solution is. It's not making the companies keep the servers up, because that's outrageous.